Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session on Indigenous Voices, Leadership, Legacy, and Economic Empowerment. Whether you're just joining us from your cozy home office or your business space or somewhere in between, we're just very happy to have you here today to celebrate National Indigenous History Month. As we get settled in, before we get started, I would love to hear from you. So I'm going to launch a quick poll right now. So the poll says, what brings you to the session today? Are you an entrepreneur looking for inspiration, or do you want to learn how to better support Indigenous businesses? Do you work with or do you support entrepreneurs? Are you exploring a business idea, or you're just curious and excited to learn? So I'm going to leave the poll up on the screen for a little bit so that you can take some time to answer that, and I will share the results a little bit later on. And while you're filling that out, before we begin, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the land that we're joining from. So I invite you all to share the territory or community that you're tuning in from in the chat. Perfect. All of the above. I like that. Awesome. So Business Link acknowledges and respects that we are on traditional land, meeting ground, territories, and gathering places and traveling routes of Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10, and the home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the lands of those who have come before us, reside here now, and in the future. Now, just a quick housekeeping note before we get started. This session is being recorded, and it will be shared on our YouTube channel, and it will be sent to you via email within the next few hours after the session ends, so keep an eye out for that. We will also have a Q&A session near the end, so please feel free to use the Q&A button, share your questions anytime during the session. And live captions are available for this webinar. Just turn them on and click the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and feel free to say hi or share where you're joining us from in the chat. But for questions to our panelists, please use the Q&A box so that we don't miss anything. If this is your first time joining for a Business Link session, welcome. Business Link is a government-funded nonprofit organization that helps small business owners in Alberta start, grow, and succeed. We offer free one-on-one business support, market research, programs, and resources to entrepreneurs at any stage of their journey. My name is Linda Posada, and I'm the event specialist here at Business Link, and I have the pleasure of organizing webinars and in-person events that bring people together to learn and connect and share their stories. And it is definitely one of the most meaningful parts of my job to especially create sessions like this one that celebrate community and culture. And for now, sorry, I'm just going to move the screen now. And it is now my pleasure to introduce you to today's incredible panel moderator, Renee Fair. Renee is a proud Indigenous leader and development coordinator at Indigenous Tourism Alberta, and she's also a very valuable board member here at Business Link, and she will be guiding us through this very important conversation. So Renee, over to you.
Thank you for that, Linda. I'm so happy to be here today. I'd like to start off by introducing today's panelists. We have Shelly Mandeville, Harley Kortepat, Robin Soye-Rachat, and they are here to answer some questions and talk about their journey of entrepreneurship. So I think I'll start with you, Shelly. If I asked you, who are you and why did you choose to be part of this conversation today?
Wow, that's a big, broad question. Well, thank you for asking. And where I go to when I think about who I am really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the businesses that I run or the job that I do. It has more to do with where I am in my life, in the sense that I am a cookum. So that's my number one job. And as a cookum, of course, I've got children. So first and foremost, I'm the matriarch of a family, and I have great responsibilities with that in tow. And everything that I do in the sense of my career and in the sense of the businesses that I run and work with, that really ties back to who I am as a person, as a matriarch, a mother, and a cookum.
Thank you, Shelly, for that. So Harley, if I ask you who you are and why you are here today, what would you tell me?
Just like what Shelly was saying, that is a big question, especially for an entrepreneur who's been doing this for since I was 13 years old is when I started my first business. So who I am is I'm Harley Quarterpat. I'm from the first Michelle's First Nation. So we are from a disfranchised nation. So I grew up knowing that knowledge, and I wanted to more dedicate my life towards that sort of conversation is through the disfranchisees of our communities. And I found that business was just a great avenue for that because it didn't have high barriers. It had really low barriers. You just needed to learn. You just needed to really just get out into the communities and do those things. And I really love that. So who I am is somebody who enjoys learning. I enjoy networking. I enjoy moving through it, and I enjoy having my kids come along with me on this wild journey. And so why am I here today is because I love talking. You can invite me anywhere to talk. I'll talk. And so I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be here with you, with all the other entrepreneurs, and I'm glad to be here with the panelists.
Well, I'm glad you like to talk. I've got a really big list of questions. So that's going
Excellent.
to work out well for us. Thank you. Robin, what about you? Who are you and why are you here today?
Hello, Tansei Bazuanin. My name is Gasoki Badat Mustahai Squeo Charging Grizzly Bear Woman. My English name is Robin Sawyer Shot. I'm a First Nations Anishinaabe Niawa woman. I'm originally from Treaty 6 territory. So sorry, Treaty 5. Why did I say Treaty 6? So that's South Indian Lake. It's in Manitoba. Why am I here and who am I? So on top of being the owner and founder of Ego Medicine Coaching Consulting, I'm also a business strategist. I'm a ceremonialist, I'm a mother, and I'm a community member. Getting into entrepreneurship, I feel is reclamation. It's nothing new. I come from a long lineage of trappers, storytellers, healers, and matriarchs. And so entrepreneurship, the terminology in this society may be a new framework for business, but like I said, like my ancestors have lived off the land for years. So bartering, trading, working amongst other tribes in terms of survival and livelihood is in my blood. And so that's why I'm here.
Thank you for that. I think what's really interesting is when we learn a little bit about who you are as people and where your journey is, a lot of times that really resonates with how you became that entrepreneur and, what drove you to get there. So my first question is actually what inspired you to become an entrepreneur? So what was the idea that made you think this was a good idea to be an entrepreneur? Harley, if I ask you, what would you say to that?
Why is it a good idea to become an entrepreneur? Well, that is a great question because it is probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, and also one of the most stressful things I've ever done. And so it has. When I was 13 years old, I was homeless. I was looking for a way out of that scenario, and I've learned that I was able to start businesses. I was able to get into companies and help them with their marketing. So I did a lot of guerrilla marketing for this is before Facebook. I'm that old. And so we had to get flyers and go around and to hand them out. And I thought that was a great way to make money. And I just kind of stuck with that through it because I didn't come from an education background. I don't have that type of education, but I do know that what I've learned through the experience of this is that it doesn't matter. None of that really matters. It's just if you can do it, if you got that kind of tenacity, if you're able to kind of figure things out a little bit, you could go far with business. You can go far. Most business entrepreneurs who are wealthy and making it don't have a very good background, and they're the most successful you ever see. So I think when it came to entrepreneurship, I really wanted to be part of that motion and be part of that growth. And it goes all back to handing out flyers at age 13 in Safeway parking lots for believe it or not, raves. And so I didn't know what that was at the time, but I was handing them out. And then I started my own started businesses from there that did well, did bad, and I just kept going.
Sometimes some of those jobs, even though we think, aren't big jobs, are really what start to shape, our journey and show us what kind of hard workers. Because when I look at entrepreneurs, I look at people who work on their business all the time. They put a lot of time and effort in. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Robin, what inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
So Eagle medicine actually came to me in a vision a couple years back when I was creating a program online for Indigenous youth to reconnect with their gifts and medicines. It wasn't until I went on maternity that I looked at Eagle medicine more than just a program offering and really stepped into the idea of it being a business. And so, as a business strategist and someone who's constantly in community and talking about entrepreneurship, because my background is social entrepreneurship, which is business for social good, that lens is creating from a place of wellness and well-being. And so when I saw my clients and other people and successful people at that talking about how they push themselves to a point of burnout or in some cases even hospitalization, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. And consistently and constantly hearing those stories, I'm like, someone needs to do something about this. And I was like, you know what? I should probably do something about this because there's a reason why this story keeps showing up. And so, yeah, Eagle Medicine coaching is about creating a pathway where you're balancing your personal and professional well-being.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Shelly, I pose the same question to you. What inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
Well, mine was a much longer road. I actually didn't start to be an entrepreneur until it's sort of my third career. I had already been quite successful in being an employee and had worked for some very large corporations and, climbed a ladder, went to school, did all kinds of things. And I really, really heavily resisted being an entrepreneur. Many times I was told along my journey as in these careers that, oh, you should start a business with that, or you should be in business. You'd make a really good salesperson. And I just thought, no way, absolutely not. It's not for me. And it is because I came from a long line of entrepreneurs, family members that were hunters and trappers and selling furs and harvesting fish and that sort of thing, living off the land and running different types of small businesses along the way. Of course, in those days, they weren't called entrepreneurs. And so my mother was very entrepreneurial, and I watched my entire life growing up in that household where she worked very, very, very hard, 16-hour days sometimes. And she had to be everything for the business. And she did have some rather successful businesses with great opportunities, but she didn't have sort of she was entrepreneurial, but she didn't necessarily have the skills that are necessary for business. So she wasn't very well adept at accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, making sure that invoices went out and got paid and that sort of thing. So I watched my mother on these very successful businesses fail many, many times. And so I just thought, there's no way I want to be working hard, hard, hard just to fail. And so there was a long resistance. But I think after going through some of those career ups and downs and getting some education, opportunities just kept following me everywhere I went. And I was curious. I was at a stage of my life where I was a single parent and I had two little girls that I needed to make sure they had shelter and food. And so it was very scary to take a step outside of being in that safe comfort zone of being an employee and a guaranteed paycheck and that sort of thing. But almost right out the gate, I had really big successes. So it was my hard work and tenacity, having left one job and jumping into the entrepreneur role, that I started to see those immediate successes. And I thought, wow, I should have done this a long time ago. So of course, with that, then came other opportunities. And so I've run a number of businesses over time, and I usually am involved in some way, shape, or form in at least 3 businesses at a time. Spread myself out that way. But the inspiration really behind it has to do with a lot of my family's traditional values of being in a position where I can be of help to community And I find that if I'm successful as an entrepreneur, and make no mistakes, I'm not a social entrepreneur. I run businesses that are profitable. But if I run businesses that are profitable, I'm also then in a position where I can give. I can give to community in whatever way, shape, or form I decide I want to participate. And once I figure things out, I'm also able to give time and my time in making sure that I'm always building up capacity of other people, whether it's inside my businesses or in the communities that I serve.
Thank you for that. So there's a couple things I'd like to highlight. In all of the answers you gave is you talk about community and paying it forward and why that matters. And that's really important because I find that not all businesses do that. So I really applaud you all for making that effort and putting all those good things forward. And then the other thing, Shelly, you talk about risk. Becoming an entrepreneur, you are at risk and you don't know what's going to happen. And it's a big leap. You have to kind of take that jump. It actually leads really nicely into my next question, Robin. I'm going to ask you, what was one of your most significant challenges you faced, and what advice would you give to others?
Balance, because I'm also a single parent of 2 small boys. And so, trying to serve my community in a good way at the best of my acknowledgement, and consistently and constantly having to navigate entrepreneurship, but also motherhood. And so having to be a present mother for my sons will always be first. But I'm also a First Nations woman before any title. And so I care about my community. And so why I say balance is because of finding that ethical balance, finding that parental balance, finding that balance that is aligned with my principles, and also walking the talk. You know what I mean? I try to practice what I preach each and every single day. And so it looks different. But once you find that grounding component of like, okay, how I'm going to show up, how am I going to put my best self forward in my home and outside of my home? So the more I pour into myself, the more that I'm present, the more that I make space for myself, then the deeper I can have my relationships within my personal and professional, right? But it all begins with self. And that's what I preach.
And I like that. And I like that you're accountable for that and that you've acknowledged that because, as we're listening to all the things that everybody's doing, you're right. If you're going to do all these things, how does that fit? How is that self-care so important? I'm really glad you shared that. Thank you. Shelly, if I ask you the same question, what was one of the most significant challenges you faced and what advice would you give to others?
Okay, well, as I was listening very carefully to Robin, because I faced some of those balance things in the past, and I've been able to manage it quite well. But for me, the biggest challenge I faced was, and I talked earlier about getting into business. I had some really quick successes, and in my first business, I had business partners. And I'm very different than my business partners. So we were kind of like yin yang. My skill set was very different than theirs, and we relied on each other and we fostered a very collaborative relationship. And I am still business partners with that first business we started. So the second business, I kind of went into it guns a-blazing, thinking, okay, I've got some partners here lined up, and they've got different skills than I do, and I'm bringing something to the table, they're bringing something to the table. And normally I go into things on a very calculated risk basis. I did not have a very good experience with my second partnership arrangement. It was something that the partnership really fell apart very quickly. And we ended up in court fighting over assets and that sort of thing. So the challenge really was in trying to find a good way to sort of assess those relationships before we pulled a trigger on creating a venture that would have been very successful, but for the fact that it was we couldn't get along on a number of sort of minor issues, and it was a very costly learning experience. And thankfully, it worked out in the end, although it was very costly. It taught me a lot of things about business, about partners, about some of the challenges and resilience things that we face as entrepreneurs. And it made me much stronger as a business owner. And I do still have that business. I managed to get through it. And it was one of the customers that I had along the way who kind of gave me the advice of, in court, they were demanding that I pay them a series of payments, and I was right, they were wrong, and everybody knew it, and I shouldn't have paid them. But he said, chalk it up to a Harvard education. It would probably cost you about $40,000 to get that Harvard education. And in 1 year, nobody in the world is going to care about what these issues are or who your partners were and whether you were right and they were wrong. And so it's worth it. Just pay it. So I did. And sure enough, within a very short period of time, the company got through it, and we're still a very successful company to this day.
I thank you for being so open because that's really hard. Like, I think sometimes we look at things as successes or failures, but there's learning in all things we do. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that was really great. Harley, I pose to you, what's one of the most significant challenges you faced, and what advice would you give to others?
Sure, and the previous panelists gave some really great examples. For myself, balance. It's I work on that. I try. I do my best. As somebody who does work 16 hours, sometimes I work 7 days out of the week. It's really hard to find balance. And Shelly, also with partners, I've had partners in the past as well that has. It's really hard to find people that match that same energy as myself, and so I've crashed companies with partners because of the disagreements. But I think one of the largest and most profound education I got in the challenge was through my company Agile Industries. So we ran a company for 7 years, and we were quite profitable, especially through the pandemic. And going through that, what I didn't learn was the difference between product development and customer relation. And I was really heavy on the product development side. We were pushing products out, and our customers just weren't understanding us. And if I were to go back, I would become customer centric during that time because our customers stopped trusting us. And I've had these customers for about 5 years, and it really bothered me that I had a loyal customer base that stopped trusting us because we were pushing out things that they didn't understand, and we looked like we were an expense. We were no longer an investment, and we lost some of the largest clients that was floating the company, and ultimately it started to go downhill. And health took a little bit of a toll on that, but at the same time, if I were to look back at that and just the emotions and the feeling that I had, the feeling of failure, the feeling of what am I going to do? What am I going to do for my employees over the next month? It was a lot of stress, and I didn't want to lay people off because employees come with families, and they have those families are dependent on those employees, and they depend on me to pay them. And thank God I had really great employees who are still actually with me on a lot of projects, but ultimately I had to lay them off. And it was funny because somebody told me, I can't remember who, and I really wish I remember who this was because it was a random conversation, and it was outside on the street of a customer's, and we're just some dude smoking. I was just having a conversation, and he's like, "Failure's only if you stop." And I never thought about that at the moment. On the drive home, I was like, I can't stop. I can't give up. I need to keep pushing through, regardless what happens. And eventually, we had to shut down the company. But I realized you're only going to fail as if you stop doing what you're doing. And failure is just another learning lesson to pivot and to really move your assets and figure that out. And it's okay to go back to say, you know what, I would have done things differently because you could do things differently now into the new scenario. So that was one of the biggest lessons, and I've had court battles with partners as well too. That was also a lesson in itself. But I think for myself, learning. I think the advice I would give is don't take failure as failure, especially in business. Always look at the strategy. Always look at what can come next and how you can move out of it. It is stressful in the fire, but you can always move yourself out of that fire. It's always a choice. And if I were to look at an entrepreneur who are going through the same things I was going through, I would give the advice to say, just keep pushing through, keep making those plans, make sure you have a strategy of exit, and make sure that you know where you're going to go with this, and don't stress I've also ended up in a hospital over stress, so I've gone through all those ones. So if you ever want to talk to me about all the things that go on in business, I'm really good at that. But my advice is push through, keep going, don't stop, and if you run into a wall, figure out how you go around it, or you go over it, or you just go through it, because there's always an option.
And I really like that because I think that's like a really strong sign of an entrepreneur. The word is pivot. This didn't work. What do I do next? And I know we saw a lot of that during the pandemic. I can speak to a little bit in the tourism industry of how people, it's customer faced. We needed people to sell our products, to have experiences. What did people do? They pivoted. And I know there were some really hard times, especially when it comes to finances. And you talking about the responsibility of other employees as well. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of things to consider. So that's really good advice. Thank you, Harley.
Mhm.
My next question, Shelly, I'm going to start with you. I really like this question. How does being an Indigenous entrepreneur shape your business practices?
Okay, well, thanks for the question. And as an Indigenous person, I hold near and dear some of the values that I learned as a child, predominantly from my grandfather, who was a very stern, strong person, and also very kind and generous and social minded. In terms of being an entrepreneur, all of those values and those teachings that my grandfather bestowed upon me have also been my saving grace in making business decisions today. So making sure that I'm very close to my personal values, I entrench those inside of my business. So making sure that everybody has what they need in order to go forward. One of the companies that I run is a manufacturing outfit, and it's an entry level job. Usually you pay those folks at minimum wage legally. And right from the get-go, we maintain that people need to earn a living wage. And so that is part of the values that I grew up around, being social minded, and our business can afford to pay people a higher wage and make sure that they have a safe and secure lifestyle. So, hearing some of the stuff that Harley talked about with respect to kind of coming out of COVID, a lot of the different practices within our company is what kind of made us thrive during COVID. We were one of those companies that thrived during COVID because we were permitted to stay open on the basis of the type of industry that we were running. And there's a very heavy weight that you carry when you're supporting so many different families and making sure that they have money to pay their own rent and food and raise their children and that sort of thing. And it weighs heavily on how I want to be remembered as the boss, the CEO, and that sort of thing. And so that really does come from Indigenous values. And we also meet people where they're at. So our priority is to hire Indigenous people, no matter where they're at in their life, and we adjust their time on the basis of where their lifestyle is sort of taking them. So, for an example, we have flex hours, and that is because part of our teachings growing up and understanding who we are as humans. Not everybody's an early bird and is prepared to start work at 7 a.m. Some people like to sleep until 10 o'clock, but they're pretty good heavy worker at 6 o'clock in the evening. And so I want people to show up in their best way and to be able to give us our business what we need. And it's a reciprocal relationship. So we do flex hours, and we were capable of doing that. And through COVID, that allowed us to make sure that we were continuously operational and we could contend with some of the various supply chain issues that everybody was experiencing. And so I guess in terms of being an Indigenous entrepreneur, being able to fall back on those really good values that I grew up on and entrenching those inside of my business has been very rewarding and beneficial for our company.
And I think it really speaks to the collective and the worldview. Like you're taking people at their best, not trying to make them fit another mold. I like that you have the capability, because I'm sure that setting this up was a lot of extra work. So kudos to you. Thank you for that, Shelly. Harley, I pose the same question to you. How does being an Indigenous entrepreneur shape your business practices?
So that's a great question because growing up, especially at an early stage, developing businesses, I didn't know there was an Indigenous entrepreneur. I didn't know there was an entrepreneur. But I think the biggest one was uh, throughout my years, I didn't know there was even an innovation space for Indigenous people. And what that actually really shaped who I am now. And I'm not going to say that I've been shaped like this 20 years ago, 10 years ago. This is quite recent for me. But a teacher, a professor, he proposed a question to me about 10 years ago, and he said, "Why aren't there enough more entrepreneurs coming off the reserve?" And that was a question that changed my life because I actually went on and studied that, and I did a paper and I looked at it, and I realized there was no access. There was no people cannot just move from one area to another. And so the way I shape my businesses is I always open it up for access. I always try to reach out to the communities. I always try to reach out to my communities here in the urban setting, and I always have an open door for that, whether it be training, whether it be learning, whether it just sit and talk with me. But I think that we are storytellers, we're knowledge keepers, and I do believe that it's important that we also push or we add that back into our communities. So I've always had an open seat policy when we can facilitate it. You don't even have to work for my companies. You're just allowed to show up and sit in the seat with us and talk with me and learn what we do. And if you have any questions, I'm able to answer them. And I try to host that as much as I can during at least once a month, where I can have somebody come in and sit with us. But I really put that extension out to our communities to show that entrepreneurship is for everybody. That you're not alone, because I felt quite alone in the innovation space. Being in the tech space, there wasn't a whole lot of Indigenous people until I found a bunch of them. So now I'm so happy about that. And also my grandpa. I go back to my grandpa too. He was probably one of the most patient human beings to raise me a little bit because he used to take me hunting, and we did not get animals when he took me hunting. He ADHD. I was very loud. I was very all over the place. You'll find me in a tree sometimes. I was out in the open. I was the worst hunter. The only ones we got were prairie chickens, and that's only because you could step on them. They will not run from you. And so I take that as a lesson as well. Just having that patience, having that openness, and just being okay that we all don't come from the same backgrounds, from the same areas, and the same idealisms, but the idea is to always keep that space open, keep it welcoming. And I think that's just really goes back to our values, and goes back to our circle talks, our fireside chats, uh, and really embodies that message. So as a as an Indigenous entrepreneur, I really try to take those lessons and that type of welcoming to my businesses, because I was welcomed into communities that didn't know me, and they're very hospitable and gave me places to sleep. And so, because I travel a lot, I do a lot of research, so I have to show up somewhere to do research. And people in my communities have always welcomed me in, and I love that. So I try to do the same in my businesses.
What I really like is you're really open and sharing some of your experiences, because I was during your hunting conversation, and like you said, you couldn't focus and do things because I think in that situations, it was about time with your grandfather, just like you're spending time, with us today, and you're offered to spend time with other people because you want to uplift people. And I think another really important thing you identified is you didn't often think of yourself as an entrepreneur and looking for those spaces with other Indigenous entrepreneurs. And I think that's a common way that people are thinking. And as more Indigenous entrepreneurs are opening business and doing these things, there's more spaces, and it's that support part. So I really value that. Thank you, Harley. Robin, I'd like to ask you, how does being an Indigenous entrepreneur shape your business practices?
That's a big question. It's the foundation. It's how I carry myself. It's how I want to carry myself. I'm a reflection of the community I come from, my parents, my grandparents, the legacy that I want to carry forward for my children. It's not about serving a certain number of people. For me, it's all about impact and having the privilege to work alongside the people that I do. And how am I making a positive difference, not only within my life, but their life? And so going back to those values, that vision, that language, that representation, I believe how I carry Eagle Medicine, because it has a spirit, is an extension of myself. And so honesty, integrity, truth, community. I speak my truth because it comes from a heart-centered place. And so in reflection to that is, how are people going to perceive me? How are the youth, are people who look up to me as a role model in my family, my community, how are they going to look towards me and seeing someone that is a business owner or a mother or community member? I carry myself in that way because I have a responsibility, not only to my family, but to my community and to those future generations. As an Anishinaabe woman, we sit down in lodge and we listen to our elders, and they always tell us, it's not all about you. It's about who you come here and who you pray for. And so it's everything. It's everything. We do business differently. It's the truth. And it's not saying it's better or it's greater. No, in a humble way. We do things differently because we think about others.
Robin, thank you for that. And I agree, Indigenous business does do things in a different way. And I've had the privilege of working with different organizations and different individuals. And I think one of the things I like the most is how you're always thinking about the community, how, everybody's involved. It's not a selfish motivation. And not saying entrepreneurs are selfish. It's a different view, but always carrying the community in mind and what that means moving forward. And I think there's a responsibility. I look at the three of you today and I feel really excited and happy to have such role models, because in times where people didn't have those role models to ask questions, here you are. Like Harley, you said, I didn't do this till much later. Shelly, you said, well, I fought it. I didn't want to do it. So, listening to your stories and hearing what you have to answer your questions, I think it's really valuable because it comes back to there's space for all of us in whatever part of our journey we're in. So I thank you for that, Robin. My next question, Harley, I'm going to pose to you. What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
That's a great question, because I get this question quite often. And over the years, I came in with very complicated, strategic, tactical answers to that, where I would look at the market, look at this, look at the trends and all these things. And over the years, being an entrepreneur, building businesses, running multiple businesses, I think somebody who wants to get into it is, I think the best advice is just do it. Go for it. You gotta. It's scary. It's uneasy. There's a lot of anxiety around that, but all of that is part of it. But you can move through it and move into the next thing. Get a hold of your friends, get a hold of people that can give you some feedback. Always get feedback, but just do it. Making sure that that feedback is bringing into the right section. But as long as you're doing it, you're moving, you're investing in yourself, you're learning. That's all you can do is you can learn in this, because it's just a fire, and you have to make sure that you know how to navigate that fire. And sometimes it is depressing, it is very confusing, and so this is where you have to lean on your network, lean on the people that you trust, lean on the people that you can talk to, and find those people in business. We love to talk to people, we love to connect, we love to network. I have never met a person in business who has said, no, I don't want to go for a coffee with you, unless they're very busy or out of town. But um everybody is really welcoming in a great way. And don't be afraid to approach the CEO, don't be afraid to approach the person that you think is way out of your league in business, because I guarantee you that person does not think that themselves. And so lean on your network, push through it, just do it, and lean on the people that you can trust and you can talk to.
I hear you talking, Harley, and the first word that comes to mind is brave. You need to be brave. You said just do it, and the ladies, they were nodding, just do it. So I think, you've got to have some self-confidence. I like that you say lean on your people, know who you people are, and ask for support. I think those are all really good things. Robin, I ask you the question, what would you give for advice to aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I was nodding my head as Harley spoke, and I'm like, yes, that resonates. Oh my God, just do it. Like, seriously, just do it. Do it scared, do it broke, do it broken. Don't think that you have to be this person that knows how to receive, right? You just show up and you meet yourself there. Even when your voice shakes, or you're like, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I'm ready for this. But when you absolutely believe in yourself and the purpose of whatever that may look like in your business, you got to lean into that with conviction. Because at the end of the day, the universe doesn't react to what you want, it reacts to what you need. So if you're saying, hey, I'm ready, even though you don't feel ready, you are going to be aligned with what is right for you in those moments. And even if it's trial and errors and you have to learn from your mistakes, how it's life. It's life. Business is life. And so, you just, what is this teaching me? If you can change your mindset around, instead of looking at something that's troubling, what is this teaching me? How can I apply this and look at it from a different lens? How could I move forward in a good way with myself and my choices and my decisions as an entrepreneur, as a person, as a man, as a woman, whatever you identify yourself with? Because once you start, as what Renee said, you need to pivot. Once you start realizing that, okay, if I put my mind to it and if I put my intention towards it, then now it's just a matter of showing up and realigning of how to pivot. So I really love that. But yeah, just do it and see what happens. Just believe in yourself, because it's crazy what the universe, our creator, will open up for you.
I love it, Robin. You're such a powerful young Indigenous woman, and it makes my heart sing, because I think that I think it's hard to overcome all these obstacles, and I think sometimes we create them for ourselves. So saying that, and then the other thing I liked about it, as you said it, you had nothing but smiles, because you can tell that this resonates with you to your soul of all your journey and what you went through, and look where it got you. So I really appreciate that thoughtfulness in your answer. Shelly, I ask you, what advice would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Well, first, I'd like to say I do really appreciate and embrace everything that both Harley and Robin have said. My advice to others looking at this as a possibility for them is, I think that you need to stay curious, whether you're ready to take that leap tomorrow or 10 years from now. I didn't realize it at the time, but those first couple of careers that I had, now when I look back at them, they were really kind of like a recognizance mission. Like I was just sort of checking things out and how things operate in these big businesses that I was working for. I did lots of things that were um, just to satisfy my curiosity. I did lots of different things, and I learned through that is I needed to embrace my fears. because it is a fearful thing to take these risks, and to believe in yourself is it's a big fear that we somehow learn as a child. I don't know when it happens, but if you can sort of treat your fears like you're kind of going into ceremony, embracing it, asking why questions, why all the time. What is in this for me, Creator? Teach me, and remember that your fear is just a reminder that you're alive, and to be grateful for that. And then sort of close up with taking a deep breath and just believing in yourself. You can do this.
I go back to brave. I just think of all the things you have went through, and I just think, wow, in awe of our panel today. I think that right now I want to bring attention to a question that I think has a lot of value. I'll read the question. It's from Jeff. I think it's a really good question. I think it's something we often have in business. Jeff asks, what are your experiences through lateral and or horizontal violence in leadership, entrepreneurial endeavors, getting through it, and how we can support other leaders who are subject to the same? Thank you all for sharing, and Harley for inspiring me here and in my community. Shelly, thank you, and Robin as well. I look forward to reaching out and learning more. Kindly, Jeff. So I think this is a really good question, because I think it's something we face. And I open up to any one of the panelists, whoever feels comfortable talking first, because I would like to hear all of your input on that. What do you think about lateral violence and the experiences in entrepreneurial endeavors?
I'd just like to jump in real quick.
Please.
I experience this a lot. And so before, I'm a recovering people pleaser, mind you. Before, I would internalize it and I would take it so personally. And I'd be like, wow, like, how can I fix this? How can I change their mind about me? And now, 2 years, I'm like, that has nothing to do with me. That is not my problem. That is not my issue. Because when you do this work personally, you realize that everything is a mirror. And so if people are coming at you or attacking you, or for whatever reason, they see something in you that they haven't yet met in themselves, but most importantly, they're going through personal stuff where projection is the only way they can see themselves out of it. So if you're experiencing lateral violence, it's because you're triggering something in someone else. But your light, continue to lean into that, keep shining, keep being who you are, because the world needs more of that. The world needs bravery, as we keep on speaking in the last question. So
Thank you, Robin. Shelly, Harley, would either one of you want to jump in and add something?
Sure. I can say unequivocally, as a woman and as an Indigenous woman, I face multiple jeopardies on the regular, and have come from a place where lateral violence was somewhat normal. And only through my journey in life, I've learned that it's not okay, and there's language around it now. So I would have to say that, it's the first thing that kind of triggers me when I'm experiencing it, to sort of ruminate on it and get angry about it. But as someone who's done a lot of healing, and has a lot of experience, I've also learned to recognize and acknowledge fairly quickly, like, oh, geez, I've gone into that trauma space, and snap out of it. And I've learned that sometimes I need to get good and angry myself in order to make change. But to sort of go into it in an angry space, and start to recognize, acknowledge that it is a trauma, that it is triggering something in me, and that, okay, so now what? It's the so what, so you got mad at me and you called me a whatever. So what? Now what am I going to do with that? And usually that's a really great space to start from, to be thoughtful and mindful that that person is probably hurting themselves, and to be forgiving of myself, and in some of the things that I've participated in the past, And then, so what can I do about that? And really, a lot of times I find that just being involved in many activities doesn't allow me to continue to be in that space where I'm ruminating over the anger. So I can get over things pretty quickly myself, but I still go into that space because I'm human.
Completely. And I think that's really important to identify that. It probably got easier as time went over when you had those experiences, because often these aren't one-offs, unfortunately. And you do get better on how to process and handle that. Harley, would you like to add anything before we move to our next question?
Absolutely. And so I think my experience is somewhat different being male and being an Indigenous male. And it was growing up, I didn't realize that the things that I was experiencing. I was homeless at 13. I had to figure that out. You don't live a very good, safe life while you figure that out at such an early age. But I think one of the things that really helped me through that was when I decided to take that step and start learning about that. Start learning what and lateral violence at the time when I learned it wasn't quite a term yet. It was just the experiences that you went through. And so I went to therapy, and that is something that I always say is I always recommend. I don't always recommend maybe therapy, but if you're an Indigenous male, I recommend Indigenous men's groups, Indigenous men's circles to talk about those sort of things. But I also going through that, I started to realize the how I started internalizing things. I'm very calm. I'm very I talk calmly sometimes. I'm not a calm person. I'm very much a person who is very much in business. I have to run a lot of things. I have to do, and I get stressed out, and I don't realize the type of stuff that I project. So now, because I have a 5-year-old son, and he's really forcing me to look inside myself because I really want to do better for him, but I started to really look at what therapy can do for me in a sense of business for emotional intelligence, and I started to learn so much, and I started going to Indigenous men's group, and I started to learn what lateral violence is, what horizontal violence is, and I see it in that group of people. That's because I'm part of that, and I see that you have to talk about it. You have to be open about it. We can't subject it to a taboo where we have to suppress it, because all of us go through it in some fashion or some way, or we internalize in one way or another. And I think the advice that I would always give around that is look after you first. Look at the those groups. Look at the people that you can trust, and work through those sort of things. Because for me, I don't think I experienced in the same way, because I don't come from I didn't start out in the communities. I have a very large gap in that. But once I started really absorbing myself back into that, I really started to see it, and I started to learn a lot about it. And I think it's good to have those type of questions. It's good to have those questions in business as well, because business is one of those areas where you sometimes have to mask, because you have to be out in the public. You have to do these things, and you can't really showcase what's going on in the background. I don't think that's right. I like to be as open as possible when I'm going through, and the challenges that I've had growing up, and moving through my journey. But I always say, be open, find who you trust, find those groups, and it's always okay. It's always okay to feel away.
What I really like is we're having a lot of honesty, and I think that's really important, because you talk about the face we have to have for business and how that needs to look, but we're also people, and what does that look when you're a person? And whether it's the COVID thing, or it's financial, and it's lateral violence, all those things are really hard on you. So how do you do that self-preservation, and not even just self-preservation? How do you actually take care of yourself? Because without you, there's no business. None of this happens. So, being open and candid like this, I think there's a lot of ways that your honesty and your sharing can really benefit others. So I thank the panel for this impromptu question. Thank you for sharing all that. Back to my next question. How can someone better support Indigenous business? Robin, I'd like to start with you.
eliminating all assumptions, leaving whatever ideations you may have adopted over time, whether that be biased or negative, leave that at the door. Because at the end of the day, we're all human, right? It doesn't matter where you come from, the color of your skin. If you can step into a space in a room that really focuses on the knowledge and what people carry in terms of the benefit, however that may look for you, then you'll be open and optimistic to whatever, offering or business or service an Indigenous entrepreneur may have. And, going back to Indigenous business and the difference around that, right? Not limiting ourselves from those pre-assumptions and being open to the concept of new ideologies and new experiences, and that being products and services. Also, those value components we talk about as many entrepreneurs really shift within their business and bring that to the forefront. So, yeah.
Good answer. I appreciate that. Shelly, I pose the same question to you. How can someone better support Indigenous businesses?
So my thinking behind this is, again, it goes back to some of the things that my grandfather said to me. He said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should be listening twice as much as you're talking. And for someone who, like I do a lot of talking, I have to remind myself to just stay quiet and listen. So to better support an Indigenous business, well, there's a full spectrum of Indigenous businesses and Indigenous business owners. And so to support them would require to understand each specific and unique situation on its own. So it would also depend on the relationship that you have with that business or business owner. Usually, if you start with listening, you might find what it is that you can do to better support them. And ultimately, I think it's probably important to ask them, what is it that they need? Because there's nothing worse than experiencing being talked down to circumstance. And I experience this on the regular as a woman in business. And I don't necessarily think it has anything to do with the fact that I am an Indigenous woman, but all the women in the room are going to understand when I say this. I have run some really successful businesses. I'm in a male-dominated industry, and on the regular, I get some real good mansplaining. So a lot of men trying to tell me how I should do this and what I should do. And it goes inside this ear and right out that ear, because for the most part, anytime I have listened to what advice they may have had, it may have been good for them in business, but it was not a good decision for mine. And I had to listen to my own instincts to become successful. So I feel like it's really important, if you are supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs, to find out from them what they think they need, and to kind of go from there. Do some real good listening and asking leading questions.
I like that, Shelley, and it makes a lot of sense. Rather than deciding for someone, ask them directly what they need. Thank you for that. Harley, I pose the same question to you. How can someone better support Indigenous businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm running in kind of some challenges just recently that I can share. And Shelly, I found that funny when you said you get people mansplaining to you, because I actually had that experience not too long ago in an Indigenous way. I'm an Indigenous entrepreneur. I'm very open about that. I try to keep up with my communities. However, non-Indigenous businesses sometimes don't know how to communicate. And I had them explain to me what an Indigenous entrepreneur was, and kind of went through this. And for the first time, I was like, is that what the definition of mansplaining is? Because that's what I felt like happened. So I continued on, but also I think part of the challenge is that when non-Indigenous folks hear that Indigenous businesses, Indigenous land, all these sort of areas, they immediately kind of put us on like we're from the moon, and that we're so different from them, but we're not. We're not so grassroots. We still want to own businesses. We want to own our market. Yes, we have things that are very intelligent people that are speaking on with when it comes to reconciliation. But as a business owner, I want to be profitable. I want to be able to help my communities. I want to be able to do the things that anybody else in business can do. And I think sometimes non-Indigenous, sometimes government will come in and say, well, we don't know how to deal with you. And it's, well, deal with me like you would deal with any other business. I'm dealing with something right now, and I don't want to say any worse because they're wonderful people and they didn't do this on purpose. But I think it's a little bit of something to remember that this happens quite often. So I'm dealing with some raising some capital, and we said, hey, we're Indigenous led. And so the person came back and said, well, hey, I have this Indigenous person that works with me. I'd rather that they talk to you. I'm like, well, why do I need that? I only need, I'm talking to you because you're an expert in that vertical that I need to talk to. Well, they set up the meeting anyways. And now we have nothing in common other than we come from a community, and their vertical is very different from my vertical. So we're not moving very fast in some of this. And I think that it's problematic when we get treated so differently in the market that the market just assumes we need to communicate with other Indigenous people, which is not true. It again, we're not so grassroots that we cannot exist without having another Indigenous person in a non-Indigenous market facilitate for us. We don't need that. But what we need is more understanding around that yes, we have a culture, yes, we have traditions, and yes, we do things in a certain way. However, that's not something that is so in the way of growing into a market that is predominantly non-Indigenous. And I think I think that we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of conversations around that, and also a lot of showcasing that I don't need to raise capital and then have another Indigenous person that has no relation to me talk to me because that kind of dismantled the negotiation. And I think it's not on purpose. That person definitely, I know this person, so they're a wonderful person, but it's a little bit of that not knowing what to do, not how to handle those things. And so we need education around that. We need to speak up on it, and we need to make sure that we're adamant and we're still pushing forward and saying that we're just normal, just like anybody else. We're not from the moon. We're not from this. We're just from here. And I would like to own a Jeff Bezos yacht one day too. Why can't I do that? I can have a business so out there. And I think also non-Indigenous businesses think that we are out there just growing trees or doing all these things. Like, no, we want real markets and we want real market share. And we want to own part of that market just like any other culture or any other place around the world. And because we work hard and we work towards those things, just like anybody else. And so education is goes such a long way, but also not just education, but just having a voice and making sure we use platforms like this to use that voice to help educate and help facilitate the non-Indigenous markets to showcase that we're open for business too.
I have to commend you for having good grace with situations like that because I can see it would be frustrating, but I do agree with you. I think this is something that is common and that it's almost an extra step for an Indigenous business owner to kind of explain, what those terms are and what needs to happen. Thank you for that answer. I'm looking at our questions, panelists, and we have lots of questions. So in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is some of the questions are directly for you. So if it's a direct question, I'll get one person to answer who the question is directed to. And then the other questions, I will just rotate between you so we can go through some of these because there's some really good questions here. Robin, I'm going to pick on you first. It says, Robin mentioned having a vision. How important is having a vision for your business?
Well, okay. I'll only speak from my experience. Everything for me begins with intention. And so when I put my intention out for when I was creating this youth program, I wanted to do it in a good way. And so naturally I followed my protocols as a Anishinaabe Niawa woman. When I received that vision, I knew that I had to nurture this because, like I said, Eagle Medicine has a spirit. And so, how I conduct myself, how I take care of myself, how I lean into my values, my presence, and all those other things that I mentioned in terms of reflection. It's not necessary if you do not have a vision, but if you have something that lights you up and that feels that it's part of your purpose, and whether that's serving your community or serving people that who are your ideal clients in whatever capacity, then do it. You know, that's your vision. That's your vision. So it was given to you for a reason, right? Just like when I said I created my business, I keep hearing these stories. Someone should create something around that. Well, I guess that's me, right? So you're given this idea for a reason.
Thank you for that, Robin. Harley, have you ever thought about going back to a 9 to 5 career after becoming an entrepreneur?
That's a great question, because here's a great story to follow up with that. So we're developing some new strategies, and we're in sorry, not strategies, some new initiatives. And so we are a team of, I think, 7 right now, and we're all interns. I'll put that in brackets in this new initiative. And it's because all of us believe heavily in what we're doing. We believe heavily in education. We believe heavily in Indigenous entrepreneurship and in teaching that. But we all are getting normal jobs, and I'm actually going for another job until we can lift this off the ground. But that is perfectly okay. Sometimes when you're raising capital and you're going through these things, you have to make sure you're covering your bills. You got to make sure that you're living your life, and you just got to make sure that you're okay. And if it turns into a nighttime weekend thing, that's okay for me. Yes, I have thought about getting a 9 to 5, because I'm pursuing that right now, until we're able to lift things off. And that's perfectly normal in an entrepreneurial life, especially when you pivot or transition. Sometimes you have to, that could take 6 months. And I think in entrepreneurship, a lot of individuals who get involved is like, oh, I'm going to start this business, it's going to be thriving in a week. No, you're looking about 12 months. Realistically, you're looking at growing it. You're looking at quarterlies and how you're going through that. So I always say, look at a 12-month horizon and making sure that you got a job and you're okay for that while you move into those transitions. So get a job if you have to get a job, perfectly fine, and hustle it on the side, because you'll get there.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Harley. Shelly, this one's for you. It's specifically about manufacturing. What challenges have you faced in regards to using Canadian resources?
What challenges? Well, I guess the biggest challenge is the sourcing of materials. When I first started my company, the only thing I could afford was a lot of the components and materials. Stuff from China is cheap. But I wanted to have a company. I always envisioned a company that was all about good quality and good people. And so when I started out, just because of money, I had to bend a little bit on that. And then slowly over time, I used to have to work with 5 different countries in terms of sourcing materials. And I've now whittled it down to mostly Canada, very little out of the United States, and only one product comes from China. So, challenge-wise, as a manufacturer in Canada, I was hyper focused on local indigenous, local community, and then if I can't find it locally, I got to go provincially, and if I can't find it provincially, I'll find it in Canada. I've had some really good success at overcoming some of those challenges. And it's almost like, Robin was talking about putting things out in the universe, and it just sort of happens for you. Um, I was contacted by at least 3 of the vendors that I now use from locally sourced materials. Despite my hunting down stuff, I couldn't find them. I don't know if they were hidden in the market or whatever, but they found me. And so those challenges are things that I've overcome over time, and I hope that was relative to what they were looking for.
Thank you, Shelley. Great answer. Robin, I have a question for you. What resources does BusinessLink offer for an Indigenous entrepreneur?
Yes. So I help Indigenous entrepreneurs specifically. And so, what my day to day looks like is a one on one meeting with me, talking about your business idea and what type of resources or information that are relevant to your industry. And so, I provide you feedback, next steps moving forward. And so, also, we can do phone meetings, in person, online, however that looks, whatever flexibility you need in order to meet you where you are. And then also we have programs such as the Peerpreneur sessions. Those are for entrepreneurs. Harley mentioned that entrepreneurship is pretty lonely, which is true. And so the idea of that is having people come together that are from all different parts of industries, specifically who are Indigenous, who have been operating for at least 1 to 5 years, to come into this space and just to talk about entrepreneurship, talk about challenges, talk about how you're overcoming those challenges and what potential resources may be available to you. I learned so much from those sessions. Like I sit there and I just absorb everything. Also, there is the Business Launch Program, which is for early set aspiring entrepreneurs who are in the ideation stage and who are needing those key concepts and components of, okay, your who, what, and why, financial feasibility. And the whole point of it is creating a business model canvas to get the ins and outs of how to operate your business and literally how to launch it, start making money, right? How does that look? Also, we have our DMP program, which is the digital marketing program. We have advisors on the team who are absolutely wonderful. I'm so grateful I work with them because I sit with them and I pick their brain. And I'm just like, do a website audit for me. Look at my social media account. How does it look? What can I do differently? How can I leverage my LinkedIn or my Instagram, etc.? They're amazing. So that's what they're going to be doing for our clients. They're going to be running website audits. They're going to be looking at your SEOs. They're going to be looking at your Google business page and how to get it up and running, but most importantly, how to leverage it and possibly generate some clients or customers. Also, another awesome program that we have is the secondary market research. So, secondary market research is basically data analytics, what are experts saying in your industry, statistics, numbers, etc. So, Bill and Carol have been with the team for a certain amount of years. They're wonderful at what they do. So, basically, you come into the queue, you have at this point conducted primary market research, which is your responsibility. And I have more information related to what is the difference between. But that being said, you would reach out to me and you're like, I'm creating a business plan, for example. I need secondary market research. Wonderful. Okay, let me connect you with the right person. So that's my day to day, and that's how it looks. Hopefully, I answered the question.
I think that's amazing. And I think your call volume is going to go up because that was a lot of resource and information. And I think what's nice about that, it's also free to entrepreneurs. This is something and they can access anywhere in the province. And I think, just to put that out there, today's panelists are speaking to people all over the province. And I think that has so much value, especially in places that are rural and maybe don't have access to resource. Your information is being carried a long ways. Thank you for that, Robin. Harley, I have a question for you. What are the resources that you have used or helped with your entrepreneurial journey that you would encourage using? So what kinds of things have you used that you would encourage others to use?
So a funny story, about 20 years ago, I saw a flyer for free food at a location, and that's how you kidnap me, is through the free food. And so I went to it, and it was a 3-day workshop, and it was hosted by BusinessLink. And so I got all the information, I got the packages, and I was reading through it. I was already experienced in business development at that time, but I didn't know how to launch into new markets. I didn't know how to go into there. And so one of the resources I used 20 years ago was Business Link. They helped me strategize. What was I doing? I was a solar panel company. Solar panels were popular then, and they're harder now these days. And then I got into fuel, so E85 fuel, but Business Link really helped me through that process. And so that is one resource I've used and I've always utilized throughout my years. Another resource is LinkedIn. I go to my network. I reach out to people. I put them in my circle. I have chats with them, and I network a lot. So I look at what's happening here in Edmonton. I see what's happening out of Calgary. I even see what's going on with our communities. and I go out and I experience those things, but I'm very tactical about it. You don't want to burn yourself out if you're going to every single event out there. Really learn who's going to these events, learn who's going to be speaking, and see if that's somebody that's within your area of interest, and then go meet them. And I always thought that was the best strategy, because now I can go back into a lot of my connections when I'm building something, and I can say, hey, does this look good to you? Does this what are your thoughts on this? And I always get good responses back. And so, Business Link, use them. Make sure you get in contact. That was a big help for me in the beginning when I was looking to get into industrialized industry. Yeah, there we go, into industrialized, and network, and be tactical about it. Find out who you need to talk to, because I guarantee you those individuals who are at those events will talk to you. They'll answer your questions. They'll give you some time to kind of run through maybe some of your ideas. And if the feeling is right, and you know about it, yeah, pitch a little bit and get used to that. Get used to the pitching, and go to pitch competitions. That is probably one of the learn how to speak at pitch competitions, because I've been on stage, and man, have I flailed and uh, talked about random stuff, but I got better, and I got better in my speech. You wouldn't tell by now because I could really go on and drone on about stuff in conversation, but learn to pitch, learn your 30-second pitch, and there's a ton of resources out there for that, and really, because it really gets you to distill down your idea into very small, manageable, critical kind of thinking. If you can pitch your idea in 30 seconds or a minute, you got a product ready for launch. And that means that you really did the research, and you really know that vertical, and you really know that space. And so pitch competitions are great for that. Don't worry about the people. They're all there to cheer you on and support you, support your business, even if you win or not. Um, but that's okay, because the biggest lesson you get out of that is just how to get out there.
Thank you for that. That's really interesting. You mentioned pitch competitions. I would have never thought of that. Thank you for pointing that out. I have one last question I'm going to ask Shelly, and then after that, we're going to wrap up our session. Marguerite has asked if they will have the panelists' contact information, and we will be sharing that. So Shelly, my question to you is, have you started using any AI tools for your business, and seeing that AI is becoming more and more prevalent in today's society? What are your thoughts on that?
I actually have started I was reluctant at first, uh, but I have started using AI to assist me. But I have to hedge that with the very fact that I've learned AI lies to you. And so it really matters how you're asking the question. And sometimes you have to ask the question in three different ways before you get the appropriate answer that will assist you. So you really have to be the driver of AI. And so I feel like my skills will probably improve over time. It is another one of those things that sort of gives rise to some fear for how it could be used for evil things. But the reality is that is our reality. And I'm embracing it to the extent that I can. I am still someone who very heavily reviews everything that I'm using it for. So I verify a lot of stuff before I'm prepared to put anything out there. What I find it's most useful for is real quick answers when I'm perhaps too busy to really think about saying something in a very professional way. So I can go to whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini and just blurt out some kind of a spiffy answer that's probably not professional, and get it to spit back at me something that would sort of take the edge off, and then I don't come across as this crazy lady responding to some kind of correspondence. So good question. Thanks.
That's good advice, Shelly. And I agree. Sometimes when you don't have time to be thoughtful and spend that time, especially on something like an email, when you just need to get the information out, that's a great way to use it. I would just like to thank today the panelists for just being so open and candid and sharing so many things with us. I took a lot out of it, and I'm hoping that all of our viewers took as much as well. I'll turn it over to Linda. Thank you again to the panelists.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Renee. And just thank you to all of you, each one of our panelists, for just sharing your stories, your wisdom, and your leadership with us today. And just thank you to everyone who tuned into the conversation. And of course, a huge thank you to you, Renee, as well, for being an incredible moderator. Couldn't have picked anyone better to lead this conversation. And yeah, we had so many thoughtful and meaningful questions come through in the chat and the Q&A feature. More than we had time to address, and we wish we could have gotten to all of them. So we do truly appreciate your engagement and curiosity. You will receive a follow-up email shortly that includes a recording, a few additional resources, and of course the contact information of our panelist businesses in case that you would like to connect with them directly and continue the conversation. So thank you so much to all of you for being here today. And the last remarks for any of our panelists?
I would just like to thank everybody for attending. It was an enjoyable experience, and it was good to get to know Robin a little bit more and to meet Harley a little bit virtually. So I'm looking forward to engaging with you guys into the future as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to come to Edmonton to catch up with Harley and Shelly. This is such a good panel. And Renee, thank you so much. It was wonderful. Thank you, Linda.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. And if you'd like to stay in touch with Business Link and learn more about our upcoming events, just visit us at businesslink.ca/events or subscribe to your newsletter. We do hope to see you again very soon. And until then, take care, stay inspired, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.